Welcome to the SaaS AdLab podcast, where we bring to you the stories of SaaS founders, entrepreneurs, and CEOs. My name is Luis. I'm the founder of Fantôm Agency, a digital marketing agency specializing in scaling SaaS companies. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Chris. He is the CEO over at Atrium.ai. Thank you so much for being on here today. It's a pleasure having you. I know people like yourself have a lot of things going on, a lot of meetings back to back and stuff and whatnot. So first of all, thank you so much for really taking the time to do this with me. I appreciate it.
Great being with you, Luis. Thanks for inviting me on.
Definitely. So to get started, why don't you just tell us a little bit of background, on yourself and what kind of led to you starting Atrium?
Yeah, so my background, I've been in the consulting world my entire career. I've kind of seen permutations of small, medium, and large consulting operations. Predominantly, I've been focused in the front office CRM space and worked extensively with Siebel technology back in the day, found my way into the cloud ecosystem with Salesforce, and that was actually the impetus behind getting Atrium started. Myself and three other co-founders kind of saw an opportunity where we take a look at the industry and where the investment is skewing towards over the next few years, and think that there's just an awesome opportunity out there for machine learning and artificial intelligence as it relates to how it connects with cloud and the business transformation agendas that a lot of companies have as their top priority.
That's really awesome. Now, did you ever think about, obviously like you're kind of dependent on another company, right? So what happens if, say, something happens to Salesforce or something like that, were to be a big shift, obviously, within the software space, because things just change tremendously fast. So if something were to happen, where does Atrium kind of go in that case?
Yeah. So I mean, our starting point has been to really plant our flag like just solidly in the Salesforce ecosystem.
Right.
And our vision as a company is, we really want to help customers navigate business transformation through AI and analytics. And it goes beyond just doing that with Salesforce. So there are many other platforms that we are already starting to work with and will work with down the road, whether that's with companies like Amazon, some of the other machine learning platforms that are out there, some of the other analytics companies. So our vision is not necessarily singularly around Salesforce, although it is a huge part of our strategy. We think Salesforce has a tremendous install base. They're a phenomenal company, as you know, so it's a great place to get started, but it's definitely an area where we're going to branch out from as we work through our evolution.
Right. So kind of just diversifying in this case and essentially not putting all your eggs in one basket. And that's something that we typically advise, for companies when we're doing marketing and stuff like that, especially through advertising, is maybe you have Google ads, running, but you don't want to put all your dollars there, because if something happens, a big shift or something, then your business is kind of gone if you're totally reliant on that. But that's great. Now, I did want to hear your take on, first of all, who are your dream customers? Like, what are some of the qualities that they contain, and what are the reasons for that?
Sure, that's a great question, Louis. So dream customer, we find ourselves a bit in pioneering land. There are a lot of companies that are trying to figure out how do they make their first investment in artificial intelligence. And that really runs the gamut. So the majority of the companies we're working with right now are Fortune 1000, big companies like a Staples. And you'd be amazed at how many of them are trying to figure out first, just like what's possible. Right. So figuring out what's possible, and then also going from there and then doing and enacting that in technology, right? Those are the types of conversations that we frequently find ourselves right in the midst of. As far as a perfect customer for us, I mean, it's interesting to see where these programs, where they kind of really have a life form of their own and where they get successful.
Right.
The more successful ones, frankly, that we see are the ones that are kind of led from business stakeholders, right? Where that are kind of, I would call it like the operations teams inside the business functions. So think of it as like sales operations, call center operations, supply chain operations. Those teams tend to be where a lot of the AI initiatives that we see that really flourish take hold and start.
Right.
You see a lot of adoption issues if things aren't sponsored in the right way. So we frankly, we see a lot of initiatives that are led from IT or the data science teams. Sometimes those, they don't ever get out of the laboratory because they don't have the right ownership. And So a perfect customer for us is one that is totally into, all right, we believe in machine learning and AI as an investment approach for us for the next several years, and
Right.
we're willing to put some real wood behind that.
Mhm. So that's kind of like the way that I wanted to direct this, right? Like really understand how are you going about really, first of all, educating people about artificial intelligence? Because even though I feel like obviously it's a topic that is talked about nowadays very, very often, especially in the software space, in consulting, obviously with Salesforce and stuff like that.
Sure.
But I feel like people still have a relatively vague understanding, of what really artificial intelligence is, and like you said, what people are actually capable of doing when implemented properly. So do you find that, maybe yourself or obviously other people in the company inside of Atrium, is there a lot of educational, material that has to be implemented before actually bringing on new customers? Is that a big part of vetting, whether someone's going to be a good, essentially a good client or not?
Yeah, you hit on it, Lewis. I think that's pretty much our number one challenge in the
Hmm.
market is creating the education, the awareness. So, and when you talk about AI, that can be a really diverse spectrum of things.
Totally.
Where we spend most of our time is around machine learning and some very specific use cases, right? So, where we spend a lot of our time is how do you take, statistics and math at scale and allow companies to become more predictive around key elements of their business. So, the type of stuff we're coaching companies on are things like, how do they do better lead scoring so their sales teams are more productive?
Mhm.
How do they identify, a customer that may be leaving their portfolio so that they know that ahead of time, right? Before it actually
Right.
happens.
Right.
How do you identify, a very important part that's going to break down on expensive capital equipment, those types of things. If you can break it down into, this is really about statistics and math. I love the movie. If you think about Moneyball, right? It's about how
Right.
do you take Moneyball and you apply that for the
Hmm.
Fortune 1000. I think part of it is just kind of defining what we do. We're
Right.
into that end of the spectrum of AI and not into like, driverless uh, automotive. So
Right. Right.
that's a part of it, and educating kind of where we fit is a
Mhm.
big part. And then the other thing is we spend a lot of time helping companies understand like what are the preconditions they need to have in order to
Right.
be successful.
Totally.
We like to say there are three things that we look for before we start a project. One is does the company have a concept around like what question do they want to answer, and is the question big enough to where it really like impact their business? So a question formed like, what would happen if I could take my lead conversion rate from like 4% to 6%?
Mhm.
Just being able to formulate that question and understand the impact. There are a lot of companies that frankly just struggle with that.
Right.
So we educate folks on what are the type of questions you can answer. Then do you have the data architecture in place? Is there really a signal in your data to answer that question? And then the third thing we're educating our prospects and our customers on is to think about it in the sense of once you have like the question and the data, where are you going to take that input and those insights and
Mhm.
then land it into the workflow of a business where large user populations can act on that and make a difference.
Right. Totally.
So if you can check the box on all three of those, that's kind of where we're educating our customers to think about you potentially have a really good investment opportunity.
Very awesome. And what is the educational process kind of looks like? Is it, the Atrium team going into a meeting with the people that are going to be making the decision? Is it through some sort of content, or how are you approaching that?
Yeah, I mean, we try to do a lot of thought leadership and blogging in the space. Frankly, the most successful things we're having is we run these workshops. They're like day-long
Very
workshops
cool.
where we do what we call intelligent experience workshops to help companies kind of define the personas, do
Mhm.
some question storming, figure out, if we were able to answer those questions, how would that actually translate into some both analytics that are rear view looking as well as forward looking predictive analytics. And through those workshops, we're able to educate and help really surface some great investment opportunities.
That's awesome. How long has Atrium been around for?
We're relatively young, so we're about a year and a half in business. We
Um,
started in January of 2018.
Very cool. And as you've grown this company, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced on a really, I guess, growth aspect? Like, is it reaching the right people? Is it making yourself known within the industry? One thing I did wanted to note is that I noticed on the website you have that you are a Salesforce Platinum, I think Platinum partner. How does that help you essentially position yourself as, like you mentioned, a thought leader? It obviously has, some very hefty weight to it. So how are you leveraging that badge, I guess, to be seen as a, better company to work with?
Right. Well, we're really proud of the status that we've achieved with Salesforce. It's kind of representative of a total team effort. So the way that Salesforce does their ecosystem and grades everybody is, how much field engagement do we have with their teams, and are we really making a difference for them? Customer sat is a big one, as well as the build out of our consulting teams. Those three things are what they look at, and I think we're one of the. There's no official historian here for Salesforce, but we're one of the fastest companies to achieve that status. And some of that, like, we're doing a lot of things right, but I also think it speaks to just the momentum of the market. So we're just over 100 folks over the course of the last 18 months. The build out of the team has been tremendous. We've very intentionally decided to create centers of gravity for our team and delivery centers in Jaipur, India, Bozeman, Montana, as well as we're setting up an office in Indianapolis. So that's a little bit of kind of where we've chosen to invest in our team. From a scaling standpoint, you brought that up. Like, what are some of the challenges there?
Right.
We kind of hit on the education front. That's a big one. I would say that the other one that comes to mind is in the same vein as making sure that our customers are successful. When you get into the consulting business, it can tend to be, a very nomadic existence. You're moving from project to project, and depending upon the project, you have personalities that are involved, and sometimes you need heroics, right? You need certain team members, and the key for a firm like ours is, how do you make success repeatable? And a lot of that has to do with how do you have like a common methodology and a common approach towards success. So that's another thing that we're spending a lot of time on this year, is kind of building out our methodology and how we can ensure repeatable success for our customers.
I think you touched on something extremely important, and really, like, the methodology, the process making, right? Where, I mean, you're still, like you said, you're super young, and I feel like in that time frame you've been able to achieve some awesome things. Like, even you mentioned about the Salesforce thing being one of the first ones in a relatively short time period. So that's awesome. But how have you managed that, that huge growth? I think you said a little bit over 100 people on the team.
Yep.
How do you deal with the pressure of, like, making sure that there's enough to I guess make payroll, right, to all those individuals and stuff like that? Like, what are some of the challenges there? Like, how do you find the right people? Where does culture fall in, and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So kind of you're hitting on
All
three
the
of
difficult
our
things.
yeah, you're hitting on three of our strategic initiatives for this year, which are, number one is, we really want to challenge the notions of the consulting model as far as how we're defined. So, our biggest success factor will be, can we figure out how we can have some really long-term relationships with our customers, so that we don't have to, like I mentioned earlier, be a nomadic existence. We think there's some really good opportunities in the machine learning realm as it relates to consulting, where we can spend a lot of time helping to cultivate relationships through care and feeding of some of the predictive models that we're putting in place for our customers. We think there's a different dynamic around how do you consult in a machine learning world that will allow us to get into a much longer term relationship with our customers. So that's big for us. That's kind of strategic issue number one. Two, I've already hit upon, which is how do we ensure delivery excellence and scale that? So we hit that one already. And then third is building a culture, right? Building a culture that we're proud of. And we're really fortunate. One of the things I'm most proud of so far at Atrium is the caliber and the quality of the team that we've brought on. And as you know, like, you get a good kernel of team and culture, and that just builds on itself.
Totally.
And we try to be really intentional about the types of people that we're bringing into Atrium, and we have kind of 3 sets of guiding principles that we hire against. One is we want folks with a ton of initiative. We want self-starters. We want folks that have passion and are authentic, right? And then the third is we want diversity of thought. We don't want groupthink.
Right.
And so all of our hiring is centered around those core principles, and it helps create the kernel of a culture that we think is going to be something that really scales in a great way.
Right. And you touched on something important there, and really, you know, like kind of like the criteria or the mission statement that, you know, it's not a mission statement necessarily, but it's kind of like those few points that individuals have to have in order to become part of the team and be successful at it at the same time. But how do you then not only, you know, say that to them, like whoever is probably going to say that they're able to do those things, right? So how do you actually make sure that they're implemented?
Right. Well, one thing you can't do is you can't just say it once and let it be like a PowerPoint slide or, you know, a picture on a wall.
Right.
It's about how do you make the culture part of your everyday, you know, every day, what you're doing every day, kind of how you're recruiting or how you're treating your customers or how you're treating your team, how you're interacting with each other. We try to back up our vision for our culture and the personality traits that we want to attract so that it is muscle memory. It's not just on a slide somewhere.
Totally. That's really cool. Now to talk a little bit more about the actual, you know, like marketing efforts and stuff like that at Atrium,
Sure.
Is there anything, and I know it's been a relatively short period of time also, and that typically doesn't maybe come in so soon, but given the, you know, the growth and that the success that you've had so far, has there been anything that's been implemented as far as a marketing initiative or something in that realm that has proven to just be something that really, really works for you? And I understand that, you know, like marketing agencies or like consulting firms and stuff like that, they're not necessarily the best at marketing themselves, which is kind of, you know, ironic, right? Because you'd think that a marketing agency knows how to market itself. And maybe it's not that they don't necessarily know how, but it's the fact that everyone else doing it knows what they're doing too. So it just makes it extremely competitive at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to think of our marketing efforts. We just engaged a PR firm recently this summer to help us think about how do we take our message to a much larger audience. So that's going to continue to be an investment area for us. So we think about it in terms of we want to occupy thought leadership in the market. That's important.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of our energy is around how do we develop content that will help educate the market, as we hit upon a little bit earlier.
Right.
And then we're doing a number of events, right, that help kind of promote the name. We've got our single biggest event of the year coming up here in about 2-3 weeks with Dreamforce in San Francisco in November. So we've got a ton of investment that we're doing at Dreamforce. We're doing things like creating our own basically base camp where we can do solutioning with customers and trying to provide a lot of thought leadership topics there at Dreamforce. So think about that event. You know, that's one that's important for us, but there are several others that we attend. We'll be at Tableau's user conference. That's, you know, you talked about technology shifts. Wow, that was a big one, right? Earlier this summer when Salesforce acquired Tableau. So we don't know what form some of these technologies are going to take, and you got to be able to kind of take the curves in the road. So we'll be at Tableau's user conference. We're at Gartner Symposium this week. So we got a lot of feelers out there figuring out what's going on with the market and taking our message to each of those different vehicles.
Good. And that's actually a good selling point, right? For a consulting firm, essentially in the AI spaces, you tell your clients, you never know what's going to happen. Like you'll kind of always need us here to kind of take that on for you. But that's really, really cool. Now, to kind of shift gears here into a little bit of more personal questions about just being, you know, in a position where you're at, where you obviously have a big team under you, obviously with other managers as well that are helping you take care of some stuff.
Sure.
What's the biggest challenge on a personal level to kind of maybe like, you know, like, is it a relationship kind of thing, or is it some like monetary kind of issues, as you are like, you know, I guess the person leading everything on?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you ask that question, I immediately go to like, where can I be doing better, right? How do I think of improving? I always feel like, you know, I can be doing a better job of listening, right? How do you always actively listen to your team? And I think when you're in a leadership role, a lot of times you kind of skew towards you got to be able to solve everything,
Hmm.
right? People are coming at you with challenges, and
Right.
I think at least my natural gearing is I want to solve it.
Yeah.
And as a part of where I want to do better and where I think I can help out with my team is it's not about me solving it. It's about how do I put them in a place to be able to figure it out, right?
Right.
And realize that there are certain things you can and can't control, but how do you really give your team like the running lanes to go be great?
Right.
And so having that balance of listening, figuring out how they can help solution for themselves, and those are all things that I personally work on.
Totally. And I think that's one of the most important things too, is learning how to actually delegate. When you're in a position of leadership and you have that entrepreneur mentality kind of spirit with you, and you kind of built everything up on your own and then started growing together with the team and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of the times you still feel like you're responsible for a lot of things, and it's really an art of learning how to take it all in, and then find the right people to send it to. Like, I'm not good at everything, right? So I obviously like pass things on, and to people that are obviously a lot better than me, for certain things. So I think that's extremely important.
I think we can say that about everybody, and it's kind of having a bit of the self-awareness to know where you have the improvement
Uh,
points so you can compliment yourself, right? That's huge.
Totally, totally. What are some of the things that you are very, very proud of? I know you mentioned one earlier, but something else.
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned the building out of the team. To me, where I get, frankly, the most reward career-wise is just watching some of the careers that have been launched,
Right.
that have been a part of. I've been a part of that in a very small way. It's just
Mhm.
awesome to see people
Right.
take themselves and take a ton of ownership and responsibility and really
Totally.
grow. So we think of ourselves at Atrium as we want to provide kind of that platform for people that want to start their careers in the artificial intelligence space and really put themselves on a rocket ship. And we think about kind of basically our gating factors as a business will be how fast can we get people in a spot where they can really help us grow the business.
That's awesome.
So I'm proud of some of the opportunities we're able to offer our team. I'm also proud of our team as far as they're taking some risks.
Yeah.
We're going into new places with artificial intelligence and machine learning. A lot of the folks that are on our team, their careers have been spent in consulting. They know the domain really well, but
Mhm.
data science and machine learning is a new domain for a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the courage to go out and challenge themselves and the status quo, I mean, we're all in that place. And so that's something that I think gives us a lot of reward and purpose.
That's awesome. Now I got to make some exclusions for this next question, but
Okay.
aside from Salesforce, what are some of the software companies that you look up to and you say like, wow, like these people are totally just, doing the best they can?
Gosh. So I'll speak about it like maybe generically.
Mhm.
The companies that are doing well, like one of our customers that likes to remain confidential. I admire them because they are, which they could fall into the status quo trap of they've got a run rate business and it's comfortable.
Mhm.
And I look up to them because they're really trying to challenge themselves to think about how can they reinvent their business with machine learning. And companies that fall into that same kind of category and cohort, I have a lot of respect for. If I were to pick a software company that I admire, it's actually Tesla, and I kind of have a love affair with Tesla and the whole crew, because a lot of people think of them as an automotive company. I think of them as arguably
Technology.
the number one artificial intelligence
Yeah.
software company in the world. And watching what they do to help make the world a better place and really challenge the status quo, I
Mhm.
think is something to look up to.
Totally. Now this one just came from what you mentioned, but what do you think of Elon?
I think he's a tremendous leader. I mean, obviously, people will knock him for some of the
Right.
things that he does, but you take a look at it, and as far as on the impact scale,
Yeah.
frankly, it's kind of hard to argue.
Totally. Huge, huge things he's doing. I definitely look up to him as well. Now, if you had one piece of advice, or if you could go back, 1 year to yourself and tell yourself one thing to do differently, what would that be?
Oh wow, I a couple of things I consistently tell myself and our team, like, hey, enjoy the moment, right? Take a minute, enjoy the moment, and reflect. So that's obviously something I think we can always work on.
Yeah.
As far as I don't know, just general rules of thumb and advice. I tend to think like entrepreneurs' number one risk area is that you're always chasing like a shiny penny and
Yeah.
focus.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like in my career, as I look back on it, the times where I've had a fork in the road, where it's like, can you go in a direction where you go broad or you go deep?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've always been best served on going deep. And
Mm-hmm.
how do you stay, within your lane of focus,
Right.
continue to improve that lane versus finding something else?
Totally.
And so we continue to challenge ourselves with that same principle as we kind of evaluate new investment opportunities that we have and where we want to take the business.
Awesome. Really, really good. And one of the last questions here, where can people find you online, Chris?
People can find us online at Atrium.ai. You can find me, just search Chris Heineken under Twitter if you want to follow me. And hopefully those are two great places for people to go.
Awesome. And one last question. Do you have any questions for me?
No questions for you. Just wanted to say thank you for having me on the podcast. And we love getting our message out there. So thank you, Lewis.
Definitely. Thank you so much for being on here. And again, thanks for being on here, sharing your story, and really, helping us understand a little bit more about AI and how you're currently leading that space. And for anyone that's watching, listening, please make sure to subscribe, give it a like if you like it, and you can listen on any of your favorite streaming platforms. So thanks again, and we'll catch you next time.
Take care, Lewis.
Bye-bye.